This is I mic myself. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to an all-new episode of Holotheatre. As always, I am Dan Tartaglione. Joining me for the first time in at least over a year is Justin Desai, and then our special guest tonight is proving that he's not a robot. Is Mr. Tom Struthers? How you guys doing today?
I'm doing well. Hey, I may have hired somebody to stand in to keep the rouge going.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're just gonna see like him glitching like Transformers. Like there'll be like a little glitch. He'll turn into a hologram.
Hey, if that happens, I mean, at this point, like Justin, you've gone on record saying he's probably one of the best players on GEMP. Like,
Yeah, I think there was I want to say maybe like a year ago they did one of the rankings,
hmm
like the contests with the points, and like usually the people at the top, like Bastion's at the top, Joe's at the top, I'm at the top, and there's like that next level. And I think Tom was in the third spot, and I was like, Tom's better than everyone in the second tier, and like I think
hmm
you could theoretically put him in the top. Because like I wasn't beating him, and this was when like Johnny was still playing too, and Johnny's like, yeah, I lose to Tom like pretty frequently. And this was when Jump was like pretty not like new because Jump's been around for a while, but um, it was when people I think like when the cards like were first fully coded and like you could sort of like actually play.
hmm
It was like Tom, and then there was Gavin. Like Heisenberg hadn't played yet, but Tom and Gavin were sort of like Gavino were like sort of like, hey, these who are these guys? Like we have our community of like top players. We kind of have it already tiered out, and Tom is sort of an anomaly. As someone who was like beating us, a handful of times and playing really well, and also had his own ideas. So it's I'm kind of excited to talk to Tom tonight and kind of pick his brain about some card things, not just the recent tournament that obviously he had
Yeah.
tremendous success in, but just sort of this past couple of years.
Yeah, it seems like Tom's been on GEMP for a while now, and this is the first time we're actually seeing him in person, uh, per se. I mean, we haven't really seen. You haven't come to a lot of. You've never come to an in-person event, so this is like the first
Also,
sighting
Dan,
of
I'm not
Tom.
sure you're seeing this, but there's a mirror behind Tom, but there's no mirrored reflection of Tom in the mirror. So, oh, there.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, okay.
The theory can go from me being a
There.
robot to me being a vampire.
Yeah, something.
That would help explain why I'm playing so many Star Wars cards games late at night.
Yeah.
Well, where are you exactly in the world?
Right, I moved to. I'm in Arizona right now,
Okay,
in Tucson. That's I don't know, 90 minutes away from Phoenix.
yeah,
Uh, Up in before that, lived in Washington all my life, mostly in Western Washington.
okay. So you're. I don't think there's any real other players in Arizona. So you're probably the best player in Arizona at this point.
Yeah, I where I used to live in Washington, I was really near like Chris Worth's.
hmm
Um I forget where MJ Turner lives, but he's in Washington too. But I remember Chris Worth's was trying to set up like times to play in person a bunch of times. But at the time, my job, I was working like 60 hours a week, and I didn't even really play Star Wars cards that much during then, and I just couldn't do it.
Okay. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about you and your history with the game. So, how did you get involved with the game?
Yeah. So with the time we have, I'll give you guys a quicker version. Had a interview with Kendall yesterday, and we kind of talked in a lot more detail about kind of like everything I did with Star Wars cards going up until starting to play on GEMP. So you guys want to hear more about that? He'll be posting his interview. So quick version is I was in third or fourth grade. My brother's older friends introduced us to Star Wars cards. We started collecting and just never really got past just playing games against ourselves. Uh, I was interested in what people did in tournaments, but so I started after Jabba's Palace came out in before Special Edition. So by the time I got curious about kind of like what happens in tournaments, whatnot, I would
hmm
the people I knew who knew about tournaments were really there had nothing but bad things to say about competitive Star Wars cards. They're talking about like the operative decks and how before that it was like the tie numbers deck and the
hmm
like Jedi, like the Son of Skywalker, Revolution, your Yoda's hut for drain that can never be stopped.
The nines deck, stuff like that.
And yeah, so I played with friends for a while. Then I stopped doing anything with Star Wars cards. Like after, before Death Star 2 came out, came back for a little while during Reflections 2, then stopped, came back after all the episode 1 stuff that came out when Reflections 3 was a thing. But I never collected enough to put together like a competitive deck. And when I'd play with my friends, it was always one-sided because I'd spent more money on my cards than them and just had better stuff. So it's, yeah, like Ewoks versus like Mara Jade and her lightsaber and IG-88 with a weapon I can fire repeatedly doesn't make for good competitive games. So then then my Star Wars card just went in a box and stayed in my closet wherever I was for a few years. I brought it out a couple times, like once when I was sick and had no internet and I was looking for things to do. That happened a few times. So I would get curious, like what, I'd start looking up and try to figure out like the value of my cards, see if I should sell them, if I should wait, and then read if like people still make events, and would read like what the tournament decks from back in the day would become. And then that's where I learned about like how the game's still going. There's virtual cards, players committee. So every few years I get curious and I kind of catch up on what's happening with Star Wars cards, but I never thought to kind of like start playing the game again with other people, because before the recent reset, when you'd read strategies on how decks work, it's just this virtual card pulls this virtual card, this pulls this virtual card, which goes to this virtual site, and it was really hard to get into because it was basically like reading. Yeah, it was like it was like a different language. So then
that was like the mid 2010s, like 2014, 2015.
Yeah, and so then a few years later, so after the reset, that's when tournaments started getting videos, and the videos would get posted on YouTube with commentary. That was after the reset. So then watching the games, I remember, the game I remember the most is the finals between Justin Desai and Johnny Chu, when it was just Throne Room versus Naboo CRV. And it was because it was like, as looking back now, it's like that was probably like, as far as like metas go after the reset, that was probably at or near the bottom for one of them. But at the time, it's like you guys were using cards that I recognize. The strategy was really simple, but also since like I had never played and gotten into game planning or anything like that in Star Wars cards, the stuff you guys were doing is really interesting, like playing Throne Room and denying icons to take away Imperial. Yeah, it's like, oh, that's so cool.
We thought about that morning. We like went to breakfast and we like, because Joe was in the top 8 and we figured that deck would pop up. And then we were just eating breakfast. I was like, what if you just like don't play sites and like they just have their decree and they activate 5 and you just like do your thing and hopefully your mace window is better than theirs. And we were like, yeah, let's try it out. Obviously it worked really well.
Yeah, and so I was watching, I was like, that's so cool. It's so simple but really clever at the same time. And then so after that, and like Star Wars card, because the games I was watching were easy to understand, and what I would just start doing is people have mentioned the virtual cards. Be like, oh, like you might have I Have You Now, but he might have Hear Me Baby. I'm like, oh, I know I Have You Now. I don't know Hear Me Baby. So look up Ryu that does. And like, oh, that's a really interesting card, and just kind of go through, listen to commentary, and then just looking up cards as I go so I could understand what's going on. And then so that was really fun. That was really interesting. That kind of became like something I would do, I don't know, like once a month, as I'd look up and see like what's new in Star Wars cards. And then so eventually got to the point where I was looking on the forum, and this was after like the Cloud City Boba Fett rifle came out, and Taco Bell posted a deck list for CCT Scum. And with the cards I had, but like back in the day, the best deck I could make was probably a scum deck. So that's kind of what I end up playing a lot of the time. And so on paper, it was looking at like the virtual Dengar can like hit someone and capture them. And then if he gets hit, you can make the captive hit instead. And on paper, I was like, oh, that's like the coolest thing. And so I remember I was in college in Eastern Washington, where it snows 3-4 months out of the year. So basically, like any hobbies I had that outside just had to get shelved for a while. So I was looking for stuff to do. And saw this deck that Taco Bill posted, and I was like, I could like something I used to do a lot when I was a kid. Was I played games against myself to test cards out, and so so I started doing that again. As this 30-year-old or 29 or 30-year-old, however I was old at the time, like in my first year back at college. And so then for light side, I made a few different versions of light side decks. Most of them are actually somewhat Justin Desai's decks. Like there's a Jockey CPV with home one, Throne Room with a new secret base in home one. There was
that was a bad one.
That
was a bad one.
I liked it at first, and I kind of got away with it after home one got killed a bunch of times. And then I think that's when the Throne Room, like my father before Insurrection, started popping up, because I remember I made one of those, but I think only the Cruelly brothers were playing it at the time, and they were the deck list I got it from. And so I started playing these games against myself of CCT scum against light side mains, and even though light side mains with Throne Room with home one, I was just mopping the floor with the dark side deck with. And so that was my hobby for a while. I was just playing CCT scum against light side mains decks and having scum deck lose. So then I started messing around with different versions of the deck. Like I went from the Any Myth Is Necessary to 12 card. Okay. And then I started playing games where with the CCT scum deck, I would just let the light side person would go to the audience chamber, and I would just let them have it. And I would, if I had IG-88, I would just deploy them on Cloud City, pull Undercover Spy, and then set up to win a damage race. And I'm playing the CCT scum deck 12 card, and I'm not even, like, basically the only time I'd use scum is I would deploy it to reduce the cost of deploying like 3 aliens or whatever. And then because and then the light side would just spend 4 force to cancel on the other turn. So it was just to make them spend force and to save me some force. And what was really funny about that is, so I'm sitting there and I was like, like if this is all I'm doing and it works better than actually going to the audience chamber, then like, why don't I just play mains with this? Why don't I just put in like EPV walls and whatnot? And it's so funny. Like I hadn't played a game against another person in, I don't know, like 15, 16 years. And I'm sitting there and I had never played online, didn't have much experience playing games. I basically invented a new deck type. And so I started playing that, and I started branching out for light side. I made some like my father before me, Watch Your Step decks. And I found that this dark side deck I was playing, like I had to make some changes to it. Like the very first one, I think had like a bunch of Lord Vaders and floated I am your father. So there's a ton of situations where it's like I just have a bunch of Vaders in my hand and they cost 8 to deploy and it doesn't really do anything. So then I started making changes to the deck, and I was like, oh, this is actually like pretty good. Because I'm playing against myself, I can just look at my dark side hand, look at the light side hand, and it's like, okay, if the dark side attacks like this, then they basically win the game. If they attack like this, then the light side player can do this and pull ahead. And then I found it's like the majority of the things I can do with this dark side deck in these situations, usually there's like one really bad decision, but then the other 2 or 3 things I can do are really good. And so I started playing this, and but when you're playing against yourself, it doesn't, I mean, that's not as fun as playing against other people.
No.
And so I'm sitting there, and this was right around the time where people started posting videos of games on GEMP. Like I'd seen people play on Holotheatre, but I didn't really, I was like, there might not many, whenever I saw Holotheatre, I wasn't super interested in getting on there, because I was like, the interface might be kind of weird to use. There might only be like not many people on there. The people that are on there might just be these really good, really dedicated players that just smash me every game. But then videos of people playing on GAMP started popping up, and then just watching it's like, oh, that interface is really easy to use. And I'm
Tom Kelly was one of the first to start post. Wasn't Tom Kelly someone who like had like his own channel for a little while before the PC channel was sort of had more content on it?
Yeah. Tom was like one of the people who he was, I think he was this guy who started everything,
like live streamed his games and stuff.
And I watched every single one of his games, and he was like a big inspiration to kind of like start playing games, and really helpful for kind of seeing like how a good player approaches their turns in the game. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, I think I actually have like this really good new deck idea, and I want to see if it actually works. So then I remember there's a spring break where I hadn't have anything planned, and I ended up staying home the entire time, and I played Star Wars cards for like 50 to 60 hours that week. And it was just getting on GAMP, going through like a lot of like I was playing throne room decks with home one, so I was playing a bunch of games where my home one just got killed in every way possible. But then I was with this CCT deck, I was doing really well, and I found it's like, oh, like if I lost a game, I could figure out like something I could do differently, or I'd add another card or something that would help me win that game. And after playing like 15, 20 games, it's like I won more than I lost, and it was a lot of fun. And I was sitting there, I was like, this is kind of cool to be like this new guy with a new deck. And then after that I was hooked, and I started playing all the time, and that's basically when I became GAMP Tom.
I mean, you qualified for the first OCS. So what was that month like? Because I think at that point, like we might have known GAMP, like played against Tom, but like qualifying for the OCS, I think you're one of the first people who qualified for the OCS who like people probably hadn't played against in a real tournament, in an in-person tournament. So what did you play those decks the first month? The first qualifying. So what would that be? 2018 or 2019? I forget how many years we've had it now, but that first year.
I remember when OCS first started. So from like the first month until the month I qualified, when it started, I was still playing CCG 12 card, but after over the few months between then and qualified, that's when I was messing around with
Hunt Down.
Yeah, that's when I first started messing around with decks that were really tracking centric, and kind of what I wanted. I made a Hunt Down deck. It was like drop and Docking Bay Polar and established control to pull Fondor, so just drop 2 activation effects. And I was playing that deck because the deck only worked really well if you tracked draws and used those draws for battles for Force Lightning, Choke Baiter. Big part of that deck was the EPP IG88.
I remember that.
Yeah. There was a lot of games against light side mains where I was just kind of pulling behind, but if I could force out blaster deflections, then I could capture Luke with IG88, and then I could make a comeback.
Nice.
So in early OCS, my light side for the longest time during the OCS, I think OCS started right after map became a thing, and that kind of took over the game for a while. And so my solution to map was a Yavin 4 operations, like my father before me deck. And so and it's funny, so that was actually like the first version of the Quaimuning deck I'm playing now, where it's Luke, Leia, Bionic Hand, Skywalkers as the big blow up this site sort of tech.
Okay.
And I found that worked well against map. I could just, because map, it was like I need one really one-sided battle in my favor, and then they're going to deploy a bunch of guys, get a bunch of use power pulls, and then I need to have enough stuff to be able to win that battle too, or at least get a really good trade out of it. And the best way I found to do that was Bionic Hand with Skywalkers and Keep Your Eyes Open. So because against Kylo, weapons weren't especially useful, and I found that Keep Your Eyes Open was better than like Blaster Deflection.
Yeah,
because Keep Your Eyes Open goes in your lost pile, and then you'd be able to get it back with your Bionic Hand. So in back-to-back battles, you're able to shut down all your weapons. So that was the deck I played for most of the OCS tournaments. It was light side deck I played in the month I qualified, and going 11-1. I was 6-0 with that light side deck, which was like that's back when light side one of the many times when light side was definitely behind dark side overall. And so I remember that qualifier was really fun because I'm basically people were cherry picking their light side games. So if they were going to put up a table just for anybody to join, it would be like dark and dark only. So I was able to play out of like my first 8 games, all 6 of them were light side. And so that month was fun because I got to get the light side games out of the way right away. And I was 6-0, and I was like, this is just a really, really good start. And then for dark side, I was playing that hunt down drop deck. So playing just like 7 or 8 Phantom Menace, and I would drop them.
Wow.
That didn't play the virtual Forlom cards back because I was using non-virtual Forlom with Zuckuss and Mist Hunter as my space. Because for space you need to kill you need to get your attrition over all the 4-4-7 ships and pilots, and I hadn't thought of using the Orasing blast rifles to do that just yet. So I remember I played that and I went 5-0, and I was 11-0, and I ended up losing my last game where I tried. I was playing against Casey and Nice in Throne Room in the last game, and I really wanted to go 12-0 because that's pretty big.
Yeah, it's exciting. Yep.
But it was Casey and Nice playing Throne Room. I tried something. Somewhat aggressive where like I put like big part of that deck against light side mains was putting like Emperor at Coruscant Docking Bay, moving him to Jedi Council Chamber, and so that way I just had to not die in space or at whatever site I was occupying. And I tried that against him like right away, and so I had like Emperor at a battleground site, walk Maul with Phantom Menace into the council chamber, and put a Zuckuss and Mist Hunter by himself, just gambling that he didn't have a ship or enough ability to clear him, and he did. And then my backup to that was to force push for another Zuckuss because I would have been able to draw a couple 7s if I got another battle. But he ended up sensing my force push by drawing a 1 when he had some like I think he drew a 1 when he had a like ability 6 character somewhere on the table. And then after, because if that doesn't happen, then I could have kicked him out of space and probably gone 12-0, but he nailed the sense. And then he just reinforced his ship. So when I drew into Zuckuss Mist Hunter, and then did like control set for stun, drew 2 7s for Battle Destiny. I got him under ability, but he had put like Jyn Erso on board, and some other. I think there was one other passenger that wasn't pilots, but he read into what I was going to do is I'm going to bounce pilot, so I just need to stack enough forfeit so that he doesn't clear me when he goes for this control set for stun attack. And after that he ended up beat me pretty easily over the rest of the game. But I went 11-1. That was the first time I qualified for the OCS, and that was really cool.
So like your entry point.
Yeah, and since then, like you've had a pretty good success in the OCS and everything. I just like how you had almost a clear memory of what you did back from 2018.
Oh yeah, no, I can. Yeah, I have a pretty good memory for a lot of games, especially the games that I lose.
Yeah, that's the curse. So it's interesting just to reference a little bit about how you mentioned when you first looked at cards, you didn't, like you said, like, well, this site pulls this site, and I don't know, I don't know what these cards do. If you read, like, if first part of this interview tonight, and then also if you look at your tournament report, I mean, you're pretty, obviously a lot of times past, you've been playing a ton, but you've completely figured out like what cards to expect. Like if you're talking about your game with Joe and you're talking about like the number of their tracking us's and just like where, you know, when he'll play a card and how like it can have like a dual impact. Or if he plays this card in his hand now and then he'll have, you know, he won't have it later. I can put it on drop and he won't have the force to do the stuff. So like it seems like you've certainly not just turned the corner, but like you're almost, it feels like you know exactly what's in the metas that you're attacking right now. And you were playing something that I think a lot of people sort of knew was there. But now it's much more known. This nines deck, like I think a lot of us, well, I don't know, I can speak for everyone, but I know that prior to Worlds, I was like, let me see if I can like figure it out. And then I was like, it's not, I'm not going to be able to get there like in this short period of time, like a week and a half before Worlds. I was like, I'm just going to play something more solid, like map or whatever. But now it's out there. And like, can you just talk a little bit about your process of doing something that not many people have done, which is in the last, this used to be the norm, like pre-jump, it used to be the norm of, you know, Worlds. What did ML come up with? What did KTOD come up with? What decks are brought? Like now with Jump, everyone kind of knows the decks. I mean, you've got like, you know, map is map. You know, it might be like a card tweak or something like that, or OA is pretty much OA, or no ideas, like a deck, like, oh, they decided to go in mains. They have space, they don't have space, like stuff like that. But you kind of created something that's its own entity, which hasn't happened in the Gemp era for the most part. It's sort of like the PC will release a new objective and people will play that. And you created something with, you know, this combat readiness deck that plays 3/2/1 sites, an extra Twix, starts drop every game, is clearly looking for Forlom, is clearly looking to draw nines and play these specific red cards or removal cards like Choke Vader or whatever. So like when did that whole process, like when did that sort of get created and how was it created?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I actually, because I figured this is something we were talking about. So I remember I sat down the other day and I tried to note down like the progression, because there was a long progression, basically where the idea to base entire decks around tracking sevens or tracking the sevens that turn into nines with the effect with Forlom or drop. The original solution the original problem I was trying to solve was, how do you make a dark side deck that can attack light side mains and OA without doing something that can just be solved by adding, you know, a bullet card or two. And so for me, the thing I started with was just, okay, sevens are good, hitting Jedi is good, choking Luke is good, Dengar and P-59 shooting the Falcon, that's really good. And so it's just, I just need, so dark side mains, Forlom, sevens, and then just figuring out the most optimal way of doing that deck. So it's like, if you think about, you know, like in science class where you see like the human evolution chart where it's just, you know, like little bacteria and a little ape, big ape, caveman, human. Like if you were to make one of those the very first tracking centric deck I made was like 4 years ago. The original one was, it was a CCG 12 card where I was just using IG88 to full activation and Forlom.
Right, I remember that. Yep.
And that deck actually had a pretty high Destiny average. So it was just a ton of, like, if Luke goes to the Carbonate Chamber, I just put Maul there with Phantom Menace and passed to my opponent and sat him. Like sometimes I'd have Force Field for Saddam. Sometimes that they just miss because he's defense value 8. And so I started with that. I forget the exact issues I ran into with that deck. I mean, one big problem was when you're tracking setup destinies, you don't want to put things on table that can be battled. So even I played like 3 or 4 stunning leaders, and that was still an issue for the deck. Then that one eventually became the Hunt Down Drop deck, where didn't use virtual forlom, but used drop put back 7 to set things up.
Okay.
And that became that dropped off when ABR got added, because it could set up these high destiny draws against old allies, but it was really slow about doing it. Like I had to, it activated a lot, and I hadn't thought of just floating a bunch of non-pullable locations to just get a ton of activation that way. So I found that it was like once OA got it, like OA was already somewhat difficult and kind of gimmicky. Like if I found a way to win off of like a control set for center against an OA player,
Right. A different story.
Yeah, it wouldn't, like it works the first time, but then they know that that's something I'm looking for. They know that's something the deck can do, and I might not find myself in a situation where like the Falcon's vulnerable to, you know, Admiral getting set for stun, and then Zuckus and Forlom coming down drawing 14 and being enough to crack and
take it out.
Yeah. Because then all they have to do, it's like my deck's slow, it's not doing any damage, so you can just take your time, stack up at the system, and then if there's enough guys there, control set for stun, it's no longer a useful option. So then that's when Lightside got really strong. That Rescue in the Clouds, Throne Room was really taken off, especially with Rescue in the Clouds, and you had the really good OA decks. But then it's still making a deck, still addressing the same issue. It's like I want to be able to hit or choke Jedi. I want to be able to hit vehicles or hit like General Leia with all the defense value bonuses. So my next tracking centric deck was a Coruscant CRV with code clearance. So that had EPP Mauls, but it was more of an ability 3 Imperial deck where I would try to fight mains decks weren't playing Leia's Blast Rifle yet. So if you had Blizzard 4 with Tarkin and Tarkin and a bunch of other guys with a high forfeit, and you're able to draw high enough so that you're clearing out 2 light side characters at a time while you're just losing one guy, then you could fight light side mains effectively on the ground as long as they're at an exterior site. And then space was like Mara, a couple Mara Jades and ship, and I was playing double back to pull Forlom, so I could also pull Boba Fett to set up Slave 1, but ideally I would draw into a Mara and ship, and against space decks I would fight them with Emperor's Reach and Tarkin, so 3 battle destinies. Dark Maneuvers makes it maneuver 9, so I can spin for 9. But then the kind of checkmate component of that deck on the ground was my only vehicles were 2 Blizzard 4s, but I would play 2 Tramples and I would play 4 or 5 7s. So I would try to get my opponent to grab something, and then I would just trample loop them to death on the ground. Or even if they knew that was coming, if you trample Luke, even if you grab trample, that can set you behind far enough to get beat on the ground. So that deck was really good. It was a little awkward though, because I against mains I needed a system, and so I was floating Kashyyyk, and I think it started with Namodian Advisor to pull it. So there's a lot of games against light side mains where I'm not doing any drain damage because I can't set my system. Another big reason. So what that deck was more successful against OA. Because I could just block the system, even if I felt like if I was worried about battling to punch it or something, I could just put Mara and ship, stack up a bunch of forfeit, and with blocking the system, that gets them down to controlling one location. So if I block the system, occupy a site, then they can't reduce the drain. And I was able to beat a lot of old allies decks using that. And I forget the other big part of the deck was so with the tracking decks, a big goal is shrinking your reserve deck down so that you can constantly activate into your high draws. So the way that deck had pretty good activation, but like the Coruscant CRV played tournament, it can get up to like 20.
20, yeah.
Yeah, this Coruscant
Yeah.
CRV deck could caps out at like a more normal amount, like 12 or 13. So the cool way I found to shrink down my reserve deck quickly in a helpful way was to play 2 Imperial Justices. So I would use that.
Mhm.
That would pull out a bunch of cards in my reserve deck, and then made it easier to activate into the 7s. So I really like that deck. I forget the exact. Oh, I think that deck. General Ballistics was a big reason why I stopped playing, because he hadn't been coded on GEMP yet. And then once he got added on there, then because that deck, it needed to at least be able to win one system, because otherwise it did no damage on the ground. And then once Ballistics got added in, then like I had spins to get around the limiting, but against EBO, it's just I ran out of spins before they ran out of ships, and I'm still, even if I spin for 9 every single time I can, I'm still getting overpowered. And it's just, they lose 2 ships, I lose 2 or 3 Imperials, and I run out of guys before they run out of ships.
So
And
I was going to say, so how did you start with this Coruscant the CRV deck? Like, why did you go with Coruscant?
Yeah, when did this sort of lock in as being like clearly better?
I started so Ballistics was a big factor, because then it's okay, my space needs to be good, but it has to be good without drawing more than 1 battle destiny. So that's when I was like, oh, like just a bunch of Zuckuss and Mist Hunters drawing 9s. Like they're gonna get good trades until there's at least one system in play where I can put like, even if like Zuckuss just dies, if I can get him back, I can eventually just put him at a system where they can't deploy enough ability, and then I can satisfy battle or do the damage I need to do to actually win the game. So that's what got me on the Legion effect. And then so my first Legion deck was like Star Killer based CRV. I'd pull docking bays, would use Quake drive yards for Mustafar, which would pull the Twix. And that, it didn't activate quite enough, but it was enough where the deck could kind of work. But then, so the big thing that led to the development of this current deck was the errata to Mustafar. So you can pull a Twix, and then I'm sitting there, and it's like, either this deck is dead because I went through and I looked at options for like getting other activation, and it's like I can play Vaney to a non-battleground location to pull Mustafar and try to get activation that way. But then it's like, oh, that's really bad, because then if I don't draw into Gook and someone just goes spy and EPP, then I lose the game. And so I'm looking through all the options to pull activation, and it's like, there's no way to pull enough activation to make this deck work. And then that's when the idea is like, well, like, what if I just float a bunch of locations? Like that actually addresses, so that makes it possible to activate enough, and that also addresses the weakness of the one I had before, where it activates a lot, but it's still not enough. I need more to make this deck work as well as it can. And that was probably like the biggest light bulb moment in making these decks, was just like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna play a bunch of sites. One big problem, so the reason I was started with Star Killer based CRV over Coruscant CRV was to get more damage on the ground, like putting Kylo at that first order leader drain +1 site. But then when I was going through and testing all the different sites, like originally this deck was Star Killer based CRV. The sites on the ground I was floating were non-battleground locations, and Darkside has like 2 or 3 that light side can't deploy to, but I was on, and like Blockade Bridge is okay because it's drain -1, but it was still like, I don't, if I have Kylo at the drain +1 site, they do 2 projections, I'm still doing 1 damage on the ground. If I'm playing all these no idea is really popular at the time, so it's I'm playing all these non-battleground locations, there's going to be spies at all of them. And even it's just going to be like, I had really good, I was playing Shizor at the time, So it's like I get a Hujix off one spot, and she's just stranded at the site. And so then my big kind of eureka moment from that was just like, what if instead of playing non-battleground locations, I just play all like Bigup's Cave still, because it's the ping against Yoda is really nice, and people can't deploy there. But on top of that, what if it's just 2-1 drain +1 dark side sites? So that way, if someone spreads to my site, I can beat up Ezra with Shizor, but then Shizor's sitting and useless the rest of the game. He's draining for 2 or 1 if Menethus fades out or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, if I have these 2-1 drain +1 sites, then I don't need the extra damage from the Starkiller base site. I can go to Coruscant, which lets me pull another 2-1, which which significantly cut down the number of games where I couldn't quite activate. Like, I activated a lot, but couldn't quite activate enough to the cards I was putting back. And then once I switched to Coruscant and had all these 2-1 battleground sites, it's like, okay, that solves so many issues. Like, activation's a lot better. My damage against space is really good as long as I can find a couple of those battleground sites. And that's when the deck kind of went. That's when the deck started to get really good. I felt like I was really, really onto something. Because the ones I had before, it felt like if I play, I was winning most of my games, but it felt like, if I play against this person, we keep playing this matchup over and over, it's just going to shift to they're going to understand that if we both play perfectly, they're going to win, because there's certain lines of play that I don't really have an answer for. Like, I remember there was a game against Justin Desai where you're playing Throne Room, and you're stacking up mains at my sites, and I had to like draw into Forlom and do all this setup. And so my solution was to just put Maul or Kylo in front of the stack of mains with, and I think I had 2 Gooks, and 1 point I started the Gook effect to make the deck better against mains. But then what you ended up doing was, sorry about the mess, I force field, you grab force field, and then you just moved away, put down Leia Rebel Princess. So I would have to move to block you, and I couldn't cause any damage in the meantime, which was so frustrating. And then because you had forced out force field, I think what happened was you put Leia's blaster rifle down, tracked to 6, and then if I ever tried to leave one guy and just block with a Gook, you would just battle and Leia's blaster rifle him because I had no defense. It was on the grabber. And I was like, okay, like, it's like, all right, he solved this deck. I need to move on to something else.
That happened. Like, I remember there was a situation. There was one year there was like, I was either Prophet or mains was good, but it was like some deck would try to block your drains, and like, it was like maybe set your core. Yeah, I think it was a set your course deck we were worried about, and we were just like, what if we just play like Draw Their Fire? And that just like fixed the whole thing, because it wasn't even about like the interrupt thing. It was just like, oh, if you're trying to block, it's like you just get this, you get the damage regardless. You get that net of 2. And then there was a year, like 3 or 4 years ago, I took out space from my Throne Room and I just put it in Draw Their Fire and BB-8, because it just like it did the same thing. Like you wanted those little extra like margins. But yeah, I mean the Twix thing, like, because I think accelerate, if you even look at like the market of cards, like Accelerate's like an $80 card, or it was, or this big thing of like Twix pullers, and there's too many Twixes or whatever. But I think the really interesting thing about your deck is the concept of those 2-1 sites. Like, that's something that I could see. I don't know if it's going to take off in every deck, because like the 9 sort of goes with it and drop and stuff. But it's a really interesting concept, because like I know that if you look at like Map, for instance, like Map doesn't play any. I guess it plays Accelerates, but it's not. It feels like a large portion of some decks is like Twix pullers and Twixes, and then you have this 45 card deck, and it becomes sort of stagnant at times, where you're like, oh, my opening hand was 3 Speaks in a Jedi Council chamber, or it's just like and you draw a card, you have 3PO, and you 3PO a card, begin to just 3POing like another Twix puller. So the concept of like more battlegrounds in a like in essentially a main deck, sort of a main deck, but not like QMC or OL allies, where like you're expecting a lot of 2-1 sites, but you just play them I think is really cool because it opens up like design possibilities, and like you can look at a card, like for instance, Shadow Collective. Like I built a deck the other night, and I think Tom, I think you were watching, where I just put 4 sites into Shadow Collective, then like used your same principle, and like because like they just banned the 2/1 site, the Hoth site, but I was like, well, I can still play it.
Yeah.
So I played your same sites, and then that deck also pulls sites like the same way the Coruscant stuff does. And obviously you don't have like the choke baiters, and you don't have like the space stuff. And it wasn't I won the game, but it's clearly like was just an idea. I just wanted to see what it looked like what was it like to just have sites. And it was like there was something there, like, and you wonder like what is, everyone has like ROPS is this thing. Like what happens if ROPS just plays like 2/1 sites, or what happens if like Scum does that, but I guess there's a lot of decks that like mana space.
That would suck so much because you're playing light side mains. You're like, I'm gonna occupy sites to prevent the flip. And what if the Dark Spire plays like, cool?
Yeah, cool. I mean,
Rob guys are over here. I'm gonna go over these bigger drain sites, and I'm gonna do my thing and out damage.
Right. Like if Rob's had a slightly better like starting ratio, it probably could almost sort of replicate the Coruscant thing. Now, let's talk a little bit about the actual 9 itself, because 7s are also really good, but it does feel like you've gravitated to this 9. But a lot of your tricks, it's still a 7. So is it simply like sort of an answer to OA, the -2? Is it an answer to like insurrection, to like he'll always kill 2 guys against like no idea? Is it simply that 9 is just a number that sort of allows you to always come on, like that extra 2, like sort of always allows you to sort of be on top? Like what is it that maybe once makes you want to play that and not like you, for instance, you play like 2 copies of First Strike, you know what I mean? Like, or maybe it's just you always draw the large hand, you just want to get it out of the way. You play Coralag and you play Fondor. Like could that be established control and then just extra copies of Phantom Menace? Like what is it about the 9s that really makes it work?
You mentioned one of the big ones. It's no idea. Like they have like there's so many situations where there's a 4/7 character, and I mean, if you're a big part of the deck is like spreading out against it doesn't work very well unless you're shuffling me or attaching me every turn and I can't do anything. But usually spreading out's really bad. It just opens you up to Shizor. It opens you up to Ninth Sister.
Yeah, First Strike.
If I have one guy fighting one of my opponent's guys, I can get overflow just from one guy
from the 9.
So the no idea used to be really popular, and so I was trying to think of what got me off that Coruscant CRV trample co-clearance deck, and it was because it couldn't beat no idea, and I moved on to that was the deck that broke that deck.
So the 9 is what allows you to feel like you have a game against a deck with forfeit 7, reduction of forfeits. Okay, that makes sense.
Destiny 9 is a lot better in space than Destiny 7, because on the ground a lot of the time it's just draws. Like for Force Lightning doesn't matter,
right?
Strikes doesn't matter, but with a 9 you can, if you ship with Lord Maul, draws a 9 that cracks home 1's immunity.
Yeah.
Right.
Home 1 mains is the hardest kind of mains to go against with that deck. So if someone undercommits and just does home 1 with Akbar by themselves, then I can kill that, and puts me in a position that's a lot easier to win from.
That's fair.
No idea was definitely another one, because if they just stack Sight and System, that's enough. They do enough damage and retrieval to and it Menace Fades, they do enough damage, retrieval, and mitigation to win from that point. So I have to attack no idea, and there's so many guys, and it's just gonna be guy up there every turn that if I fight, I have to do a Gook suicide, and I have to clear out as many characters as I can with whoever I'm suiciding. So like the deck list, it plays 3 Gooks. No idea. Gooks help with a lot of situations. Like if I have a bunch of characters on table and I'm going to mains and they shuffle me and they come down and they just beat up every single one of my guys, I'm probably drawing low for most of them. So
Yeah.
if I don't have Gook, then game's over. If I have Gook, then cool, they kill one guy, maybe not lose anybody, maybe lose one guy, and then I have time to reset the deck where I'm just drawing my track draws over again. Because let's see.
So obviously you played that deck on the PC20 event. You went with Qui-Gon Communing, a deck that you've been playing recently. So how did you feel about when you went into that event? Because you played on day one, you went undefeated. So again, like you played Chad Dixon, Logan. Then you played MHT, Joe Olson, and Brett Bailey, and then you played MHT again. So nice little run, first of all.
Yeah. So with the choice for the light side deck, it's I going up to that because I don't usually play a wide variety of decks. That's something I definitely run into trouble with when it comes to the match play events. Is it's really easy to put me on certain decks.
Yeah, the first season of OCS, I remember thinking like you're only going to play 2 decks. You were going to play the Hunt Down. You're going to play CCT. So it's like played Y40 with best spin.
The actual because I think I went Coruscant CRV with like Emperor shuttles with no answer for starship weapons, and you had X-wing cannons, and it was just awful.
Oh, you did switch it. Yeah, you switched up. But I remember I was like, do I really want to play Y40 with best spin? But I was like, Steve was like, no, he's gonna play the one of those 2 decks and play like 3 rapid fire and like, yeah.
That's so funny. My choice, the decks I was choosing between for that was the Coruscant CRV that I ended up playing and AOBS because it was just really,
wow.
I'd only played
that
like
would have
6
been good.
games. Yeah. So I was kicking myself the whole time because I was like, he's either gonna choose an interactive deck that's just teched really hard for like Hunt Down or whatever, or it's gonna be a space deck. And like I'd only played like 6 games with AOBS, but it was so strong at the time that it was pretty straightforward. So I was very close to going with that. But anyway, so the original question. So for light side, 90% of the games I played were with Qui-Muning decks, and the one I ended up playing was the most recent version I played a bunch of games with. And the other deck I was playing was like an old Watch Your Step.
Yeah, I saw some of that.
Yeah, with Careful Planning Lobot, which is really fun deck. It's actually pretty good. I wouldn't call it a great deck, but
Careful Planning Lobot. That's cool.
Yeah.
So that I didn't go with that because even if winning against ROPS was difficult and it would take a while. And I didn't, it's like and that deck had trouble winning by, because it put a lot of cards on table and I have to draw a lot of cards into hand to have all the tricks to make it work.
Yeah.
And so it didn't win fast. It didn't win by a lot. And ROPS was hard. It was definitely doable, especially if people didn't have, if people are relying on capital ships as their counter X-Wing cannon, because I could definitely overwhelm capital ships with that deck. But so I just went with Qui-Muning. It was the deck I played the most with most recently, and it seemed really good against what dark side players were playing. I mean, I didn't expect a lot of people to play Shadow Collective, but if sometimes people just, even if a deck isn't what it used to be, people will stick with it just because they know what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, people play Shadow Collective, great.
Yours is so good against Shadow Collective.
Yeah, I got one game and it was just very cruel.
Right. Right.
So, and then like you after going 6-0, you had to face Mike Kessling. You played the same decks, but you were allowed to change 5 cards. You want to? How did you feel about that? And what 5 cards did you change?
Clever.
Yeah, for Dark Side, that was so hard because it's 5 cards. That's 2 Grim Taj, the 5 cards is when I did practice games against myself where I played his deck with 5 cards. He went with 1 Bish Shuffle, 2 Grim Tosh. I went with 2 Bish Shuffle, 2 Grim Tosh. And yeah, it was really interesting because I found that like you didn't even need inconsequential barriers to be my deck, because if you just kept shuffling me enough times, I would never set up the draws to even make it so I would play a set for stun. Yeah, so for practice games I played Quiemuning against Map 3 or 4 times. I immediately my first thought was I'm not gonna like Neighbor's not gonna work. That's the first thing people are gonna see when they look at the deck, and he's gonna take that away because there was 3 Neighbors at the time. So another funny that deck so up until the tournament I had played 2 Neighbors in that deck and I ended up going to 3 because I lost the game against Desai playing CCT because I wasn't able to get enough Neighbors or the sense to be able to get from the Carbonite chamber to the audience chamber. And then so I was like, okay, like if I add 3rd Neighbor, and then I would have a much higher chance of winning this matchup if someone does what Justin did against me.
That's funny that you said the Neighbor thing too. I messaged our team group, like MHT, and I right after the slip sliding away errata, and I was like, Neighbor's like way better. Like that's probably like the biggest thing that I recognized, because I was like, no Gick effect, like you can Neighbor to just like, and then grab Gick. It's like it's much easier to like Neighbor and grab Gick than Neighbor and fight through the Gick effect. It's just like a different type of sequencing, like knowing they have the Gick effect, because like you're gonna get the games where they just don't have Gick, period. And they don't see the Neighbor coming now. And I was like, and Rob's, you just like toss it, like it's just whatever, like you just cycle it or what have you.
Yeah, and one of the biggest changes was because when you would start the effect, and the 3rd marker, the best play against Loot Class Jedi decks wasn't Maul turn 1, it was to go guy with a gun.
Yeah, guy with gun, and they couldn't do anything
from there. But with unless you get lucky and you open hand the Cook, that doesn't become a good option.
You play like a Ray and just like or something, and exactly.
So
no, that deck was smartly built. I looked at the list and I thought, but also that the 5 cards were good. Like I thought both your 5 cards were, that your light ones were not obvious, but like that, okay, like Baragwin, Claw, Country Falcon, like that makes sense. Like, and then the dark though, the ties were really clever. That was cool.
I love the ties.
I thought of that a little over an hour before the match started.
Okay.
No way.
My original plan, like I didn't have a solid original plan, like for things like that was such a nightmare. I thought
it would be like Dengar, to be honest. I thought it'd be like 2 Dengars and like 2 point men, and then you would just go, because you had the obvious pullouts too. And I was thinking that maybe you wouldn't even take those out, like that you might not go to 5 cards, or like because like you had the 2 Maul Strikes and the Force Field, like those are obvious. And I was
I almost kept those in instead of set for a stun, just to raise the destiny average in case I wanted to try to attack early.
That's fair. Sorry. It's interesting because like in the chat, even Bill was saying his team figured that they were going to put you on Bargwin and Landing Claw, but I think you surprised them by going 2 Landing Claw and 2 Bargwin.
Yeah, I mean, with that, it was like I'm pretty sure some of his cards are going to be dedicated to stopping Nabrin. The big reason why I went 2 Landing Claw, 2 Bargwin was because I was worried that he would try to cover both with just multiple good combos instead of the one that he started with. So it was a big relief for me when he pulled the Insurrection effect, because I was like, okay, if he's doing that, then there's probably still only one good combo.
Did you think about playing 2 different ships?
Yeah, and testing.
That's what I was thinking.
And testing it was Hunch and a Falcon and a non-virtual Gold Leader and Gold 1. I ended up going with 2 Hunch doing the Falcons because basically going in, I was like, I hope one of the cards Monarch. I'm not gonna draw more than 12. And so I went with 2 Hunchy and the Falcons because if I didn't have Landing Claw, I could still go to space with Hunchy and the Falcon and survive a turn. But whereas Gold Leader was only good if I had Landing Claw, and if I'm not, if I'm
Right, that
respecting
makes sense.
Monarch, there's going to be a lot of
Yeah.
like that. If I was doing a less good ship, and that was the one I drew, because that game I started with Hunchwing Falcon. If I started and that was my Gold Leader, I wouldn't have been able to go to space on the turn that I did, and that would have turned into
Much different.
Yeah.
Then I would have been like paying to drain, so it'd be like 4 damage and he'd pay to drain, do 6, and not a huge difference, but I was trying to win by every single card I could because I knew my dark side.
Yeah, you knew it was bad.
Not
Yeah, I
good.
figured that
it's
would be
not
really
gonna
bad.
do very well.
Yeah, taking out the low destinies and like fighting early, that's an interesting strategy. That's not gonna work too well. Like even if you draw super well, it's just you'd have to have your maul.
Mhm.
Yeah, I tried that
The
for a
ties
couple of
make more
games where
sense.
it was my cards were just like I'm second Shizor, 2 force push, second barrier canceller. Try to get it so if Ray is by herself at the site
makes
for
sense.
1, then I can, if I hit her, it's like I don't know, 10 damage even if I don't draw great.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I had a bunch of different ideas. I tried fighting with Shuffle and Grimtage with Sense. That worked. That only worked if I could. And in the practice games, I played it where the first like it would no sense shield for the first sense comes out because there's whatever he's expecting from me that probably wouldn't be it.
Wouldn't be sense.
Yeah.
But that had some issues. That I would have to deploy a Dark Jedi somewhere, which other than Emperor, it would,
You don't really want to do it, yeah.
early. Yeah, if I'm deploying early, can't beat a Jakusai because they'll just get beat up by like Poe and Speeder or something. So if I don't draw Emperor, then I'm putting a good Dark Jedi that I want to use for battles at like the Coruscant interior site or something.
Right. That's not what you want to do.
When Sense worked really well was when I got Erica and I deployed as Undercover Spy. So then it's like, oh, she's just there to stop a drain, but she's really there to send Screamtouch and Shuffle. But that didn't happen super often. The other issue was I didn't necessarily want to spend force to deploy anything except Forlom, and even with Eric, I didn't necessarily want to stop damage early on because what damage means is I peel cards, and it makes it so I might be able to activate to my whatever cards I'm dropping sooner.
Is that the general plan always? Like, do you ever do stuff like prior to? Like, are you just essentially trying to accelerate to get to 20 cards? Like a 20 card entity of force.
Pretty
like
much
reserve deck, yeah.
I very rarely try to play. That's like
you're almost never playing stuff in the mid game.
Yeah, it's never like 3 EPPs, fight, draw, 6 battle destiny or 6 weapon destiny draws or anything like that. Usually if I'm fighting and if I want to clear out a big stack of characters, I do it over time where it's like Suicide, EPP Kylo, hit a guy, draw a 9, clear 2 more.
First strike, that makes first strike gets you some of that value back.
Yes.
Definitely.
So against
makes sense.
biggest deck I do that against is No Idea. So No Idea will stack up at the Scarif Beach, and so I have to map out I from playing that so many times. The map out I have in my head is they stack the site. Ideally, I have Erica there to make it so that I don't. Yeah, so I don't eat the drain while I'm suiciding into it. But if I don't, I don't. So it's suicide number 1 is P59, no first strike, shoot. If blue 11's there, shoot blue 11.
You said no first strike?
Yeah, because if it's P59 with first strike, then lose a character from hand, cancel a shot. And then that's force size. So I would do
it's nifty.
Yeah, so I would do P59, no first strike, shoot something, cause the force loss, draw 9, so they have to forfeit whoever got hit plus somebody else. Then the second suicide would be choke Vader with first strike. Big reason I was playing 3 Gooks is No Idea players who knew I like to do this would grab Gook So if they don't do that, then 2 is enough. But if they do grapple hook, then 3 is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first suicide would be Choke Vader. He chokes someone, draws a 9, clears 2 more. Third suicide would be another Choke Vader. He chokes, draws a 9, clears a few more. And then by that point, no idea is getting worn down to the point where I can actually deploy multiple characters and have a
Have a chance.
Wow, that's really interesting.
That's just interesting. Yeah, definitely like that. But
And
yeah,
I would do that. I would do that in space too. Like
concept.
Suicide, Boba Fett, clear a couple pilots to either force them to deploy more, force my opponent to deploy more pilots to get up to the ability need for Zuckuss and Mist Hunter, or just they don't, and then Zuckuss and Mist Hunter has something that they can beat up.
So, question of the night for me: do you think the deck is overpowered in the sense of does it need a correction, and if so, what would that correction be? I mean, I think personally the card that would probably like hurt, like and change to drop, I feel like would be the most
Yeah.
devastating.
Yeah,
I think a change to the 9 would probably make it worse, but probably still playable in some way. But what is your thoughts?
The deck is better with 9s. It can still work with 7s. I've tried. One of my variants I tried was I cut Legion effect, and I played like Insignificant Rebellion. So you win a battle, they lose a 4, stack it on there. And so I was using that with just Phantom Menaces and Specters, and Specters are really cool because then you can play it to get Kylo back.
Yeah, like infinite Kylos. I had a list, like I had to bring them like that for a little while, but yeah.
Yeah, but if you wanted to at least slow down that deck, then like drop V, add text like Virtual Forlom is lost or something like that, just so you can't.
Just so you can't do both. That's interesting. Now, do you think it needs it? Obviously, your success rate is really high. But I've had decks where I say like, yeah, but you don't know. Like, so for instance, this is not nearly the level of time and knowledge you have about this deck, but like for instance, I took the sort of new age ROPS to the NPC this year. I knew it was really good, but then people, Drew was on messaging me on design and saying, yeah, well, ROPS is actually probably the best deck. I'm like, no, ROPS is actually not very good at all. It's just that every single mains player at that point was playing a turn 1 Luke. Like that was just like I'll stop you from flipping. And I was like, well, if you do that, I mapped it out. Like you just save force, you get your Veers, you get your thing, you beat them down. And then they try to like figure stuff out. And then at that point you use the street, you're up on cards, you start draining for 2 with battle plan. They're kind of reeling, and eventually you just pick them apart at Twix. And it's like the sequencing just always worked out that way. Whereas if Light Side just actually like saved 7 force or something, you're just as ROPS, you're like, yeah, like the deck just falls apart. So like, does ROPS need an errata? No, I think ROPS is actually like pretty bad in a lot of matchups. But to that same vein, like, does your deck need an errata? Are there hidden bad matchups? You don't have to tell us what they are, but are there like, are there major holes to the deck outside of double Grimtash, double Fifth Shuffle? Because I think like design wants decks that are innovative and creative in the world, but they also don't want specific like bullets that need to be played in multiple. So that you've clearly figured out a way to beat a single Grimtash or a single Fifth Shuffle. But like, is every deck going to be 56 cards moving forward, or do you actually think it just needs to be toned down?
I don't know. It's because it's kind of weird how this happened, because it's basically because I'm playing online only. I'm not playing in real life tournaments, and I'm not like I qualified for the OCS a few times, but then ended up either losing the first round or just being at a point where it's like I can't be spending time on these games right now.
Right.
So it's kind of like I was able to play, like rack up a bunch of games, like hone this deck. They're really good at it, where people notice but didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to it.
100% agree. As someone who's like going to events, like should we look at Tom's deck? And she's like, yeah, we should. And it's like, it's a lot of work.
It is.
And so it's like a lot of these games I'm playing a matchup I've played like 10 plus times, and this is the very first time that someone's playing against it. So there's that factor. On one hand, it's just like this, me playing this deck versus other people playing other decks. It's not a super fair comparison because I have a very clear idea what I'm doing, and the people playing against me don't have a clear idea what they should do against it.
Now that the list is out, do you think that changes a lot of the deck too?
Not really. Maybe add a shield polar. So
no, not like what changes to the deck. Like, do you think it changes the power level, knowing that people know your list? Because that's the thing. Like, that was a deck that pretty much. I mean, you could have scouted you and stuff like that, but I don't think anybody thought that you only had 5 guns.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody realized your destiny was that bad, like with the rest of the cards, so that like turn 2 you kind of are safe with, even if you do have 20 force, you know, like it's going to be 10 power and you're probably going to draw 0.
Yeah, I think every single game I played against OA before this tournament, people would always do Lando, Ray, both on the ship, fly up, whereas against this deck you should clearly leave Ray on the ground and take the free drain because I'm probably not attacking. So like that's with the deck list being out and people seeing and people being able to see what Mike did. It's like, yeah, all my old allies games, it would get harder because I'm eating 3 damage and then the OA player wouldn't be paying to drain, which a lot of people do with the deck, which I agree with as a decision. So the deck list being out, definitely makes the deck more challenging. But where one of the big reasons why the deck works is just light side being behind, light side not being able to dedicate the cards for anti-tracking and like what I do, where it's really like really delayed aggression, but once it starts, it's every single turn.
Every turn. Okay, that makes sense.
No.
So the with the deck list being out, it doesn't really change a ton. It's got like OA is going to be harder because everybody that's familiar with kind of what happened here is going to know what to do against it, and there's going to be a lot of other decks. Like a Diplo is another deck where you can just put a guy to site turn 1 and start getting free drains, and no Diplo players did that against me before this when they absolutely probably could have gotten away with it. Other thing, a lot of it is kind of benefiting from the meta. Like the
mains,
light side mains is really good against a lot of dark side decks. It's not good against this one. I think.
What are the answers if people want to play mains against you? Like, I guess other than just Grim Tashing and Hoochix or Biff Shuffling is probably just the bite the bullet and play the 4 cards.
That's a good question. I mean, in any deck, Biff Shuffle and Grim Tash are going to be good. They're always going to set me back like a turn each.
I guess tracking us is good against you as from the main side.
Yeah,
because like that stops some of your tricks.
Yeah, but one issue is just where main struggles, where other decks do better, is if you set me back with Grimtage or Bith Shuffle, you need to be able to do a lot of damage before I get set up again, which normally
doesn't really do.
Especially if like I get Grimtage and I keep Erica, or I get Grimtage and I keep Control Set for Stun, because against light side mains, I don't need to place Control Set for Stun. I can just play it to cancel drains.
Okay.
So like Joel Olsen, he got like 2 drains of 3 in from on me, but cancel them both, and it's
we played in the fall. It was like that. I think I had like Luke out like 3 or 4 turns and just like did a bunch of damage, but it just didn't do anything. Like it was you would play a ship to space, and like I knew you were gonna like eventually duel me. I think it was an OCS game actually, like right before Worlds, maybe like September. And I was like, yeah, like this just isn't like, even if I'm up on cards at some point, like it's just not going to work out.
Yeah,
I think for like main sort of has that realization point, like, yeah, I'm probably locked. Where other decks I think don't have that quite as much.
The matchup I had against Joel Olsen, if we play that same match with the exact same cards we played 100 times, I would bet money that I'm winning all 100 of them.
Well, yeah, that's kind of sick. Now, what do you think? So I mean, that's some of the like designs probably gonna say like, okay, there probably should be an errata. What if the 5-card rule is instituted? How many times do you win?
Against Joe, probably like 1 or 2, maybe.
He wins 1 or 2.
No, I win 1 or 2.
So like if he can change 5 cards, and if he can add Grimtash ×2 and Biff Shuffle ×2, that it changes it by a 98 game change.
Probably, yeah.
Wow,
I mean, I'm definitely losing more than I win.
That's insane.
So you think the Grimtash thing is just that big?
Yeah, and with how I have it, so with Biff Shuffle versus 5 rifles, so because something I really benefited a lot from in the finals was on the turn I got shuffled, I ended up being able to keep a 9 on the bottom of my reserve deck just out of random chance, and that ended up in like that was big. That was the turn where I cleared Poe for free and got to
I saw that.
Yeah.
Reserve deck, and like that was
he was a little sloppy there. He had like 2 4 ability guys at one site. He had like Ray and Lorson Tech at the same site.
Oh yeah,
which was like knowing open deck list that was sloppy on his part. But obviously there's a lot to think about with your deck. Ninth Sister's not always.
Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of the time, like if you play that turn 10 times, he's gonna be safe on.
That's true.
9 of them. Because the only reason I was able to attack that was because the 9 stayed on the bottom, and there's only like 4 or 5 in the reserve deck at that point. So out of it was more than 15 cards, less than 20. So that was really, really lucky on my part.
Yeah.
How much have you discovered like tracking like different manipulation things as you played this deck more? Because I've learned more about it. Like I've only played it maybe 7 or 8 times, but I'm like, oh, this card's gonna be here. And there's like a lot of games of Star Wars you don't care about like what your card, like you care, but like some of it's somewhat irrelevant. But like Black Sun, like you can track your whole deck, you can know every card is. But like for your deck, for instance, like when you get the pile of 7s, you get 3 of them. It's like sometimes you activate 2, and then you put your top card in your reserve deck, and it's the first card you use. So then you know it's gonna be a 7 the next turn. Like how often are you, like once you get to your 7s, how often are you like manipulating it at that point? Or is it as simple as, hey, I'm putting one down, I can always draw that. If there's no fights happen, I can draw it, put it down in Forlom. Like how often are you tracking multiple cards versus just using your engine?
It's probably about 50-50-ish, because a lot of times like that what you're talking about where it's
3 7s.
Yeah, where it's like so say I'm active 4 7s on the bottom of reserve. I activate, like if I want more force to spend, then activate, leave 2, and then track those 2 9s.
And use the 2 because it's the first cards, and you're sort of taking the 2 over and over again.
Yeah, that sort of thing I do like all the time. A lot of times I don't need to, but it's definitely something that I do a lot, especially when I want to get more force, because then I can just on my turn I can drop another
do
9.
stuff. Yeah, you can do stuff. Yeah.
So
yeah, what's interesting about the deck is it's so like we're talking a lot about tracking. The tracking for the Coruscant CRV deck, it's easier than any tracking centric deck I've used before. The tracking with that.
Well, yeah, you have the drop, and it's like flipped agents. You get whatever.
And then it's
just peak, but
then it's just knowing where my 9s are when I split them up. So like if I battle at 2 locations, then and I have 2 9s on reserve, they're gonna get split up from the first strike.
First strike and the force
payment, retrieval, pay for battle. So that's probably one of the more complicated tracking parts for the deck. But like with the Quimuni deck I was playing, that's a lot more tracking. That's where I'm actually trying to remember like 3 cards that I use pile and where they
the
are,
orders and stuff.
So like if Forlom gets a restraining bolt put onto him, how badly does that hurt you, and how much does it change the deck?
With only 5 9s, it can be detrimental. When I was playing the most I've ever played that deck with was 8/9s, and in those games, if I got restraining bolted, it didn't matter as long as I was able to still draw cards and draw into 9s. So what a big advantage of 4-LOM with drop is, since you can rotate your 9s, 4-LOM 9 to hand, drop it. It cuts down on the number of 9s that the deck needs to work, so it just gets a lot more card efficiency.
You always have it on both.
Yeah, but if and that was because a lot of the tracking decks I played before, it wasn't drop, it was just 4-LOM, and that was my big fear, was restraining bolt, because then that just breaks the deck, but hardly anybody's playing it. But with this one, it's just, if restraining bolt's really common, then you just need to play more 9s, and then just plan ahead where it's not just okay, I'm only relying on my drop 9 and my 4-LOM 9, but you start dropping 9s every turn and keeping track where they are, so that if you do get restraining bolted, then the 9s are already in the reserve there for you.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So we do got some more stuff going on in the Star Wars world right now. The OCS is still being played. Yeah, I know we could talk like this all night, like guys, but we're already over an hour.
We're over. This has been informative. It's been very technical. It's not quite the usual show, but I think hopefully people are finding it interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So there was one thing I want to do before we wrap up. I posted in Slack. I was asking people to guess at who has the most wins against the Coruscant CRB deck and who has the highest winning percentage.
Not me.
Not me either.
So I'm not sure if we have like chat, if you want to take more guesses or anything, but we can do that.
I was poking in at chat. Chat was pretty quiet, unless I'm missing.
The chat has been quiet. I will. We still got more shows, so if you want to hold off on that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can wait till the end.
Yeah, anybody who wants to hit up the chat, put your guesses about who you think has the highest winning percentage against this deck that has played it 3 or more times. Is the rule.
But yeah, you've had some good guesses so far. I know one of the big ones. But Gavin and Heisenberg, Stubley was another one. Dylan. So a lot of people who play a lot. I can see it. And then the OCS is still going on right now. Shaw's in first, followed by Gavin, and then Stubley. Running on our top 3, and then the retro event still got a few more weeks of that. So as soon as I find
Tom, are you gonna play in the retro event? You gonna make a run?
I know nothing about.
Those are your cards.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Senate versus Senate or whatever.
Not many.
It's annoying. That's all I remember. But Johnny Chu, Justin Desai, and Casey Annis are all in the top 3. So it looks like you guys are going to be set for that. What did you play, Justin, for?
I played Dark Senate, and I played Light Senate, and I played Throne Room. Those are my decks.
All those classic K-Todd decks?
Yeah, it is cool like how things evolve, though. Like, information does change things. This happened with one of the first throwback events, the one that like Hayes won in 2010 or so. And like TJ came back for, and Stephen Lewis and those guys, and like it's just you look at lists from like 10 years prior, and you're like, like the best decks then weren't actually that good, and like evolution happened. So like looking back at like the decks that I made with like KTOD Senate was like one of the top first decks I ever made that was really good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I didn't really need this card, or like the very first version of it had like Chimera in it. You know what I mean? Like, why did? Because I was like, oh, I can't move my ties. Like, who needs to move the ties? Like, so you look at some of these things in the past, and you're like, what was I thinking? So there is cool to these older formats are fun to evolve and like look back and say like, and then you look at like recent cards like Boris Singh's Blaster Rifle and Begin Landing Your Troops are neither of those cards are virtual. So like theoretically, although you'd have to put them with like Janus or something, but or Reagus Reactor Terminal, something like that.
But so far you've got two other buddies in the top 8, Matt, Harrison Trainer, and Steve. I don't know. Is this like a
Steve
top
has
8?
One more to play.
Yeah.
No, it's top 4. Which is kind of weird. So like I think Steve has to win and get some good breakers. He's got to find the game. He's been really busy. But it's been cool to like text Johnny and have him text like stuff like
what about Beargwins, and what about just like the usual stuff that it's fun to
Yeah.
have him back in the world a little bit with this.
Well, it doesn't look like there's a lot of people who do need games left. So yeah,
Yeah,
Steve
I
might
think
need some.
there's some pretty cool foils, so I think people might be playing like the last couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, I need games to get my last few games into. So, but that's all that's
You
really
guys
going
will
on
play.
right now. So you guys ready to do some swing and a miss stuff?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, our first question: Grimtash and Monarch are now essential cards in the meta.
Yeah, I mean that's a hit.
I mean,
That's been a hit for a while. They've been underplayed for a while.
I mean, you look
But
like
now it's
Dark Side main. You
exaggerated.
throw like what 3 Lukes in them. Like, yeah, I can see like both those cards being essential, not just because of Tom. What do you
Tom, what do
say?
you think?
I know what I want to be true. It's a hit.
Now, are you saying that just because you think your deck is making them being played, or is it something else?
Well, I'm with very little Grimtage and Monarch. There's some like that opens up because what players like me are really big about is I don't think this person has Grimtage or Monarch. So I know in my deck I have a certain combinations of cards really beat. So if you don't have to respect Grimtage or Monarch, even if I only have like 1 or 2 of whatever,
You can always get them.
Yeah, it's just like verify your reserve or whatever until it's there, draw and get
Draw,
to it,
yeah,
and then
right.
push that line for the rest of the game. Like big part. One of my harder games was Quiemuning against Matthew Harrison Trainer's Rops, playing the kind of Rops that you guys made really popular. And way I was able to win that game was draw 20 cards, make sure I play his Blast Rifle, and I had High Destiny cards put back.
Right.
And what I ended up winning the game off, being able to use a 7 with Boya's Blast Rifle to kill the walker that Veers was in and get overflowed.
Oh, wow.
That's nice.
And I can't do that if I can't draw more than 12 cards.
Yeah, I know a lot of people do like to draw more than 12, so keeping them below 12 wouldn't be too bad. Okay, question number 2. Mains are still the best option for light side.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, we'll start with you, Tom.
Overall, yes.
I would say that's a miss. I think that I don't think they're clearly better. I think No Idea is really good. I think Old Allies is really good. I think Mains is certainly part of the puzzle, part of the pie.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that they're above the other choices.
Yeah, I think with you put OA or No Idea, hell, even I think Watch Your Stealth, give it a little bit. It might be powerful.
Like Diplo, and there's some stuff on the surface too. Diplo, Legend, QMC. There's some stuff out there.
You put those in any of those decks in the right player, yeah, I think they're going to be just as good as Mains. But yeah, I agreed. Mains is still going to be part of it. Question 3: CCT lacks a solid way to protect the audience chamber with the Mithril canceling Stunning Leader and virtually all non-profit decks playing the Mithril. I'm going to say a hit here. CCT, haven't seen a lot of CCT being played like ever since the Mithril came out. I was not a big fan of light side having no penalties to playing the Mithril.
I like the concept of it not being so obvious, like CCT is going to have Stunning Leaders and blah, blah, blah. Like people having to evolve matchups, like Tom mentioned earlier tonight, like when he first started playing CCT, like sometimes he would just give up the audience chamber and pull it undercover spy or something like that. Like I like when things CCT, especially considering it has the exact same turn 1 every single game. Not being able to just like, okay, play my Stunning Leaders. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like we've punished some forms of evasion. We want battling to happen. And like the audience chamber became this thing that like felt like you could never battle into. So I don't think it's a bad thing. They still get a lot of their power bonuses, and like we just printed 2 6 power guys. Like take out your stunning leaders and put some 6-power aliens in your deck and see what happens.
What do you think, Tom?
I've literally played one game against CCT and during this, and I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know too much about it either.
That's fair.
All right, what's the next one, Dan?
Last one. Light side cannot make a mirror of the dark side Tom deck.
Oh, it's a good one.
I'm gonna say, yeah, let's go with hit.
Let's go with Tom's
Yeah, let's go with what
answer
Tom
as
says.
a good one.
I'm gonna. It's a miss. And light
You've
side.
tried it.
I have. Yeah, I've definitely tried. Like
Thrown
even way back
back.
in the day. My big idea for a light side version of this was out of
Hidden
Y
base?
Pro because
Oh,
you could- yeah, because then you get your activation from pulling the systems.
Okay.
Reason why it's a miss is with dark side, if you just eat damage for the beginning of the game, you take like half of what light side takes if they do that against certain decks. So it's just
Okay.
yeah, if you try to take your time to set up and do nothing but set up draws against dark side, it's just you hunt down kills you. You do 10 damage before you do anything, if not more. Watto hurts a lot.
Oh,
and,
right.
and then light side just doesn't have as many. There's no set for stun for light side. You have like Leia's blaster rifle, and I mean, like Ray drawing a 7 at +1's cool. General Kenobi can draw 7 and add 1 to it, make 8, and that can be really good in some situations. But if it's just hunt down, with Emperor and Vader
Stacking, yeah.
You're just better off. And with light side, it's really easy to make a solid deck with really high destiny average, like especially if you're playing mains. So there's not a ton of benefit to it, and it gets broken very easily by decks that do a lot of damage early.
Awesome. Okay, so
All right. Do we want to give Tom his up? Do we have people in the chat? I'm not looking.
yeah,
at
we have people in the chat. I don't think really anybody has mentioned any new players who any answer to your question.
All right, unveil it, Tom. Who is it?
So it's actually for both questions, the player with the most wins and the highest win percentage, it is the exact same person, and it is Gavin Ortland.
I knew it.
And
I knew
yes, he plays Grimtash. He always plays Grimtash. He plays on Gemp a lot, which means playing against me a lot. And yeah, so
Yeah, it makes sense. Grimtash sense home one. Like knowing, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And it's funny because, like we've said it, you both have been playing Gemp for a long time, it feels like, and you all play a different style of deck than anybody else. So awesome. So again, tonight's token is going to be, I know if you guys stuck around, tonight's token is drop V. So make sure you email holotheatre@starwarsccg.org. I think we still got the lore challenge. You want to do that, Tom?
Oh, what is that?
You have to guess a card's lore.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Okay, you have to guess the card based on the lore.
Yeah, I give you the lore, and then you guess the card, and you get some help. You can either have Justin help you, or the chat can help you.
Do you have the card, Dan?
Yeah, I got one. No, the token was drop. Okay, so I'll give you the lore. I'll give you the. Then you can pick either the set it's from or the type of card, and then you can get Justin's help or somebody from the chat.
Fire away, Dan.
Okay, the lore is being sent to dispose of 2 Jedi is the battle droid equivalent of a really bad day at the office. Would you like the set or the type?
Type?
It's an effect. Okay, so you've got...
this is an easy one.
You got 30 seconds starting now.
I have no idea.
Battle droid. It's battle droid. It's an effect.
Where are those droidicas?
So no, I was going to say, so you get help from the chat or
No, he
Justin.
said, "Where are those droidicas?" That's his guess. It is not. It is not. It is not accurate.
Are you? Is that you're going to be your final guess?
Why said it's not accurate?
I don't. I mean, I can.
Justin can help you.
I don't know. What do we got?
No, what I'm saying is Justin can name a card, and you can go with it if you want.
Sure.
I mean, I'm guessing. I think I know what the card is based upon who we have on as a host, and what you sort of gave as a hint, and also the actual lore itself.
What do you think it is, Justin?
Is it thrown back?
It is thrown back.
Right, it's like so obvious. You have Tom on. I think it was either that or like Orising's blaster rifle or drop itself, but like
I figured those.
It wouldn't have been dropped with the bad day at the office. It's a picture of a bunch of droids falling down. So.
Yeah. I figured going with that was kind of a. I was going to go with drop, but that was way too easy. This one was a little. I just like, oh, okay, I'll just change it to throw him back and see if Tom can get it. But
all right, final question of the night, and then we can call it, Dan. Will you attend a real life event in 2022 and maybe even 2023?
That's the important one.
That's a good question. I wouldn't foresee it happening this year, but next year, who knows?
World is in Germany.
Yeah, but I think there's talks though of there being an LA event next year.
Oh, that'd be cool.
So, I mean, you're in Arizona, you're in Tucson. I know LA is like what, about a 9.5-hour drive from you.
Oh, could be. I don't know off the top of my head. That does sound about right, though.
Actually, no, less than that, because it takes me from where I'm at to get to Phoenix 8 hours. I'm 3 hours away from LA, so 6.5-hour drive for you.
Hey,
there you go.
Do it up next year.
But,
all right, guys.
But thanks, Justin, for coming on tonight. Thank you, Tom, as well.
Yeah, no problem. That was fun.
So starting next week, I'm not going to be on for the next 4 weeks. I love 9-hour drives. I'm not going to be on for the next 4 weeks as I'm going to be moving back east. So I know I've been talking about it for a while, but finally took the idea and ran with it. So 4 weeks off from me. So Jared Napolitano is going to be on next week. I got to pack up my computer, then drive across the country, and then Comcast, how long it takes to get their internet service.
Right.
But thanks everybody for watching. Guys. Take care, and we'll have more Holotheatre next week.
See you later, guys. It was fun.
I'm gonna take care of me.